You cuss out your mother for 2 weeks for $5 million. Do you eat ass, bro?
Yes.
This girl who was my best friend's older sister, and she used to terrorize me. And I was visiting a neighbor down the street from where we lived. I'm coming out of her house. My friend's sister's coming up the street. So I tried to go back in my friend's house. She was like, no, you're going to have to face her. So she's standing there calling me all kinds of names. I'm not caring about that. I'm trying to get home. So then she starts talking about my grandfather, who was my love. And my grandfather only had one arm. And she started talking about, yeah, with your grandfather with one arm. And I started seeing red. Right. I jumped off the steps on her. And I beat her butt. And I jumped up and ran home. Then I found out she was pregnant by my cousin. Oh. And I was so scared. I monitored her for the whole 9 months. I went to visit the baby. Oh, my God. I checked him out. He was good. But I know that's right. But I stood up. And she never, ever accosted me. And she spoke to me like we was friends.
Right.
That's how I was like, what?
Little bitch, you know me, come fuck with the team. Little bitch, you was dirty, little bitch, you was a fiend. You know we the best.
Back at it again, episode 94 of The Men's Room. 6 more till 100. This episode, we're going to talk about mental health. And for this episode, we have some new guests on the show. You want to introduce yourself?
Oh, you gonna start with me? I did not ask to be on here, first of all. And then you gonna make me first.
You got voluntold.
Right. So what do I do? First name, last name? Like, how do I introduce myself?
Just anybody you want to
Hi, everybody. I'm Jess.
I've been here before. I'm not new.
You know what?
I'm Stacy.
Hey, everyone. I'm Amber.
Hello, everyone. I'm Marguerite.
Right.
Yeah.
So, for this episode, like I said, it's mental health. We have a few mental health questions and probably 2 questions about just 2 more silly questions, just with black related. 2 questions, just it's
Black related questions.
yes. So
We should. No one should get this wrong. And if you do, you get your black card, your card revoked.
So you're going to be asking about my cousin?
Right. My cousin's in there.
Right.
okay. First question. This was a post. A post that said the number 1 indicator of a child's ability to thrive in the world is the quality of their mother's happiness and well-being. How do you feel about this statement?
Okay. And what is that? I guess I would say, what is that based on? That's based upon the mother's
happiness,
skill of child rearing, and happiness.
Happiness and well-being, just their overall, how happy they are in the house, or just how well.
Is this in a single parent home?
Right, context.
Yeah.
What's the context?
That there was no context with that.
I think we got to expand on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
What it means to us. Yeah.
Okay.
So I think if you're talking about no father in the home, because I think that's what it sounds like to me.
Mm-hmm.
That you're saying is the quality of that child's happiness based on the mother or, like the absent father.
It was just solely on the mother.
Okay.
So read the quote again.
The number 1 indicator of a child's ability to thrive in the world is the quality of their mother's happiness and well-being.
Okay, so when I hear that, that's to me, that's an opinion that it's the number 1. And I think that could be an aspect of what happens with a child and their outcome, taking into account that I believe that children come through their parents, but they're not solely what the parent has raised, that they have quality that they brought with them. Mm-hmm. And it's also important to me to understand that they have an inner being that is constantly speaking with them. And sometimes they're listening and sometimes they're not. And so I think a lot of what happens with them has to do with their alignment with that part of them and how they're relating to their experiences in the world. So
I would say I agree with that. Because it does sound very one-sided.
Yeah.
Especially because I also work with moms, and some of my moms are not happy. But it does not mean that they're also not giving their best to produce their version of a happy lifestyle for their child, regardless of the situations that have been given. Mm-hmm. But then them themselves tend to put themselves off and aside and then project this imposter of, we're so happy, we're so great, and all these things are great. Things are happening, but sometimes she's struggling inside to just to have simple motivation and encouragement. So I would say the parent and the role, the responsibility is different in every unique situation because again, it's generational. Because that parent or that mom or that father may not have been raised by their biological parent. They may have been taking parenting techniques from their grandparent and they're just modeling what was taught or displayed to them of what their grandparent or their caregiver thought happiness was.
Yeah.
And what does happiness look like for that child to produce that for that child? But again, it's still very much so subjective because to that child may not say that, that was the happiest time of my life.
And then they can become whoever they are because of or in spite of.
In spite of.
Yeah, so,
Yeah.
And I guess for me, I don't really agree with that statement, for many of the reasons that were already stated. But, also, I just feel like as a parent, and I'm not a parent, but I was a kid, before, and I have parents. But I feel like, your goal is to make sure that your child is good regardless of what's going on in the world, regardless of what's going on with you personally. You see what I'm saying? Like, to protect your child at all costs. So it's kind of like, even if that mother is unhappy, and even if it's not a mother, if it's just a parent, mother or father, or, in between, whoever it is, or guardian even, even if that person is not happy, everybody has a good day. Everybody has bad days. Some people go through divorces and some people lose their spouses tragically, through death and through sickness and disease. And, different things happen for different people. But at the end of the day, I feel like the parent is the foundation. So it's kind of like, even though stuff is going on in the world and even in our world personally, I can look to my mom, I can look to my dad, I can look to my guardian for, and have confidence that everything is going to be okay because they can assure me that. You see what I'm saying? Because they're going to do everything that's within their power to make sure I'm good and that I don't miss a beat and that I don't feel the effect of what's going on, even if it is something that could potentially affect me, that I would have to go through. And that's just my personal experience.
And we even have models of that within our own family. Of different people who have gone through things that could seem very harrowing and even nefarious in its of itself. And the resilience, I think it's like you have to put a demand, what do I want from myself coming out of this situation?
And that's for the parent and for the child, I feel. That could be for the parent and for the child.
Yeah. And I
something you said earlier about protecting our children, and I wholeheartedly agreed with that early on, and I evolved into empowering our children as opposed to protecting them. Because when we protect them, we're actually telling them that we're going to be there to intervene when things get really tough, and that's not the worst thing. But I think a better thing is to empower them so that they're able to make choices that will take care of themselves.
So what does that look like?
So that looks like allowing people to make choices, resonate with those choices, and do whatever they think they need to do, so that they're recognizing that the outcome has to do with what their direct choices are. And so sometimes we have to kindly let our children fail, and that's a word that I'm going to stop using. They went on that, let them see what it feels like to make a choice that doesn't go the way that feels best to them, so that they recognize what it feels to be on the downside of something that they want. Because you can't really appreciate the upside of something until you've really understood the entire thing. It's one thing to know about something, it's a different thing to actually know it. And to know it, that means you know the inside, outside, bottom side, and around side, which gives you a perspective that you can make choices in the midst of however it's coming to you. So if it's not coming according to the script, then you know what to do because you've experienced it. And life to me is an experience. It's not just the theory and what we've been told. Words to me are guideposts. They point you in a direction, but they do not teach. That's my personal experience in life.
So at what age do you start empowering versus protecting?
You start immediately, but you don't do the same thing with a 3-year-old that you would do with a 13-year-old. It's like when little children are learning how to walk. I remember they used to freak me out because they look like they're going to fall. You want to catch them and prevent them from hurting themselves. And I remember having family members around that would stop and say, let them have that experience, and so that they can find their balance. And so So some of them would, just allow anything. Others would sort of intervene and only let them go at partially. So it's like training wheels. It's like, helping them with training wheels and then starting to push back on that so that they're catching their own balance. Because you can't ride a bike until you can get your own balance. I don't care how much help somebody's trying to give you. You can't do it. You've got to be able to find your own balance. And you got to allow people to do that. And sometimes that means falling down and hurting yourself.
But I feel like there is maybe like a silver lining with that too, because I feel like, especially early on in a child's life, they do need protection. And when I mean
I'm not
protection,
saying totally leave them out there, but absolutely
yeah,
start
no, but I
guiding
mean,
them.
I feel like that protection can turn into that, it can breed that empowerment that you were talking about. But our kids truly do need protection. And by protection, I mean shielding them from certain things, especially like external dangers and stuff like that. And even sometimes internal dangers. Because I know sometimes just through listening, to stories from my sister's work and, other stories that I've heard, and especially working with the youth and hearing their stories and things like that, there were times when, these kids have been violated. A violator was in the house. You see what I'm saying? Absolutely, it's case by case. But there have been times when that has happened and that child has come to the adult, come to the parent, the guardian, whoever, and explain that to them, and they
Still weren't protected.
still were not protected in the home. You see what I'm saying? And this is the person you're looking to.
Exactly.
Yes.
And even some parents who grew up in a situation where they weren't protected,
Right.
they tend to be overprotective of their children.
Yes.
And I think, a lot of us have fallen into that. Oh, I have to protect them from this. And, but then you do once they get to a certain age, I think you do say, okay, I have to pull back, I have to let go, I have to allow.
Yeah.
And then that's when you start, more of the, I guess, empowering part of it.
Yes, but then also that. Oh, go ahead. No.
One of the things I remember is, when I was growing up, it was before they started telling kids not to talk to strangers. And so for me, that never made sense, because my thing is teach children how to trust their instincts. Because many times, and I think statistics will bear this out, the person that hurts these children are the people they know. It's not the strangers. And so trusting your instincts. I remember, parents, when I was growing up, they would make you speak. And, to certain adults, you had to respect certain adults. But we knew certain adults were not good for us to be kind to, but our parents were telling us that we had to. And so I was never the one who forced kids into hugging, holding on, talking to parents that they didn't feel like that. And it wasn't a disrespect thing when they just felt like, your child, if they're just being obstinate. But you also recognize when they're not feeling comfortable. And if they're not feeling comfortable, help them figure out what that is and why that is.
And pay attention to that.
And allow them to explore their own. So that's what I mean by empowering. That's empowering. When you teach them to trust their instincts. And in order to do that, you've got to make choices and stick by them. Many of us have said, oh my goodness, I should have listened to my first mind. That's your instinct. I knew I shouldn't have done that. That's your instinct. And so if you learn how to follow your instinct, in certain situations, I don't care what my friends are doing, I don't care what they're doing. I'm not doing that because I know that that's not good for me to do.
And then it's still that open, line of communication that I feel like has to be, repeatedly emphasized throughout the relationship, because it's kind of like, you want me to, as a parent, I would want my child to trust their instinct, but at the same time, if my child comes to me and tells me something, I want them to be able to feel like they can tell me the entirety of the situation, and not feel like that's the relationship that my mother and I have, especially when I was, coming through those teenage years and even transitioning into college, when I went away for school and, that was my first time away from home and different things like that. It was uncomfortable, and it made her uncomfortable sometimes, the things that I would say, but at the end of the day, it made me feel good and confident knowing that somebody knew what I was really up to. You see what I'm saying? Somebody knew what was going on. Somebody knew that if anything that happened to me, this is what happened. This is who you should go to. This is who I was around. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, you see what I'm saying? And I had that relationship, and it felt great, because at the end of the day, she wasn't just one of my friends, you know, she was my parent. And so this was somebody who was an authority figure in my life, somebody who, if something really did go down, they know what to do. You see what I'm saying? So I feel like that's really important too, for our kids to really trust their parents. Because if they can, because a lot of them do not have that good relationship, and I see that so much nowadays, and it just really pains me. But it's like I feel like it just goes back in.
I knew she was
Because I said, hold on. But you know, what I say?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
You sure you trust me?
Yeah.
Do y'all have that relationship, those open lines of communication?
Open lines of communication.
I mean, we talked about some personal stuff, yeah.
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 But then also,
Okay.
I'm telling
you
you
know-
about my life all the time.
Okay, well,
It works both ways.
I think it also goes into, we have to also be careful sometimes of the line of, you know, protecting versus building a codependency.
Yes. Yeah.
Because some of the kids, you know, depending on how you build that rapport with your child, it could be toxic.
Yeah.
To the point where you coming up to school fighting other kids for your kid. And your kid, because again, Baltimore City.
Now I got your attention. We at the Men's Room are now announcing that we are selling our first male skincare product called Real Men Don't Cheat. Now with this product here, it is made from all natural and vegan ingredients, and it is sourced from an all black business. Now, with this product here, it goes for about $25 and is the smell of a Hugo Boss scent, if you're familiar with it. So, if you're out here looking for a new smell, new lotion, you're a little too ashy, get this. Because we all know, the better you smell, the dirtier you'll get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then also, I'm telling you
know-
about my life all the time.
Okay, well,
It works both ways.
I think it also goes into, we have to also be careful sometimes of the line of, you know, protecting versus building a codependency.
Yes. Yeah.
Because some of the kids, you know, depending on how you build that rapport with your child, it could be toxic.
Yeah.
To the point where you coming up to school fighting other kids for your kid. And your kid, because again, Baltimore City, you know who you are. Some of y'all parents is coming up to the school,
Yeah.
claiming that y'all, and I'm talking to
And
you.
coming up to the Fridays
Coming
with my
up,
daughter.
exactly, trying to fight the administrators, you fighting the children, but that's not your role.
No.
That, to me, there's a distortion. Something there has crossed boundaries where you have to honestly let your kid have the consequences of their actions. Like I tell my adults, I don't believe in good and bad decisions. Good and bad is relative. What's good for me might not be good for Jess. What's good for Stacey might not be good for Amber. So it's kind of like you have to make a wise choice.
Yeah.
And that's
What's
taking
working?
really taking that emotional mind and what they call your rational mind and bringing it together to make a wise mind, a wise conscious decision where you're not just, you're causing your brain and really making it function and using that executive functioning. And everything is on wiring where all the neurons are firing to make sure that whatever decision, whatever consequences I'm putting into, I'm going to, at least hopefully the goal is I'll be able to survive it. But I'll have some type of peace in moving forward in whatever that is, or at least some type of empowerment moving forward with that, you know, with that choice.
Yeah, I agree with that. To me, it makes me think of bullying.
Yeah.
You know, I remember.
Okay. And I was getting ready to ask that question too about bullying. You know, as a parent, you have to navigate, just like you said, it's a fine line between going up to the school and fighting somebody, or do you let your kid just get beat up? You know, what do you do? And I was telling conversation is good, but there has to be something beyond conversation.
But you got to start somewhere. That's what I mean.
And I was telling, because I had this conversation with Grant and Gabriel the other day, and they were at that was a question they posed to me. What do you do? And I said to them, there was a situation when I was in elementary school. This little girl used to take my lunch every day. And prior to her taking it, I used to give it to her. She would come to school. She didn't have a lunch. She couldn't get to school lunch for whatever reason. And I didn't like what I was, had in my lunchbox. My mother would send me bologna or white bread with mayonnaise. 3 things I still hate to this very day.
Do not come from my Aunt Ethel. God rest her soul.
So I was glad the little girl wanted the lunch. I was glad to give it back. Exactly. And then I don't know if she was embarrassed, but then when I started giving it to her, then it became, I don't want your lunch. So it was a bullying thing. And then she was taking it. So one day she took my lunch and the lunchbox, and I had a Wonder Woman metal lunchbox. Okay, so you know how long ago that was. I came home. A lunch pail. It was a weapon, actually.
That thing can do damage. It can catch a bullet.
So I came home crying, and I will never forget. My mother and my father were both home. They were sitting in the kitchen, and they were like, "Oh my God, what happened? What?" You know, they're all concerned. And then when I finally get the story out, I remember vividly. My father said,
Go back.
he looked at me and he said, "If you come home crying again, I'm gonna whip your ass." And I was like, "Oh, we're not gonna get your ass whipped, right? We're not doing that." So then, but my mother always said to me, "You're supposed to be a lady. You're supposed to talk about it. You should never fight in school. Use your words." So I'm trying to use my words with this woman, right? You know. And then my father told me he get raped with my ass. So then the next day comes. I go to school. The little girl says hi. I whip her ass all up and down the hallway. Then I get
The consequence.
Exactly. So, you know, where do
But wait a minute, did your lunch get taken anymore?
Never.
There you go.
And I got my lunchbox back.
That's right. I wanted too. I was like, oh, she done lost
I got
her.
my Wonder Woman. I love Wonder Woman to this very day. You know, from that point on, it was always a thing where from that, and I remember so vividly from that day on, anytime somebody said something, I was ready to fight. It was going to be a fight.
Right.
Because I had some words, and again, I would rather fight in school than to have my father.
Right. Nobody at home.
I'm not doing that. So I'm going to tear this ass up in school.
I had a bullying situation as well, and it was this girl who was my best friend's older sister. And she used to terrorize me. And I was visiting a neighbor down the street from where we lived. I'm coming out of her house, and then my friend's sister's coming up the street. So I tried to go back in my friend's house, and she's older also. She was like, "No, you're going to have to face her." And I was looking at my house saying, "Can I jump off these steps and run home?" So she's standing there calling me all kinds of names. I'm not caring about that. I'm trying to get home. I'm trying to measure this out. So then she starts talking about my grandfather, who was my love. And my grandfather only had one arm. And she started talking about, with your grandfather with one arm. And I started seeing red.
Right.
I jumped off them steps on her. And I beat her butt. And I jumped up and ran home. Then I found out she was pregnant by my cousin. Oh. And I was so scared. And I monitored her for the whole 9 months. I went to visit the baby.
Oh my
God. I checked him out. He was good. I know that's right. I stood up and she never ever accosted me. And she spoke to me like we was friends.
Right.
That's how I was like, what?
Right, but it's kind of like also bullying times are different. So you didn't have the internet.
Sure,
there wasn't nobody. There wasn't World Star.
Yeah.
You know, going out and, you know, filming it. And then also the kids are now taking it into a new depth and a higher height.
The cyberbullying.
And not even that's the cyberbullying.
I mean, weapons.
But weapons.
Yeah,
Kids are like,
well, but the cyberbullying is getting the kids to commit suicide and different things. So that's,
that's something
especially
else.
at the elementary schools, which is just
But,
heartbreaking.
I think that helicoptering sometimes sets kids up for that kind of thing because their older parents with more experience is intervening for them, not letting them exercise that muscle that allows them to stand up for themselves. To me, you've got to learn how to stand on your own 2 feet. And that is no matter what. You talk about a strong man, you are not going to get a strong man from those kinds of things. You're going to get a strong man from letting them learn how to stand on their own 2 feet from a young age. But if they can't stand on their feet, they're not going to be standing. You're not even a woman. In order to be a good mom, you've got to be able to stand on your own 2 feet.
Yeah, but then also I'm gonna push a little bit and say, yes, let the child stand on stand on their or learn how to stand on their 2 feet. But then as the parent, fight a different battle on a different realm with adults.
Yes, right.
Do not stoop down to a 16-year-old's level.
Right.
Like, because again, you can take out, and
and that's modeling. That's a part of it as well. You gotta model how to be a strong adult, male or female. You gotta model that for your child, because they're just like you saw what your pop did, what your mom did. I did too. And we all did.
But then I also, I was sitting with one of, because I briefly had time in the school system, and I did enjoy it. And one of the kids was talking to their assistant principal, and they said, they said, we gonna jump you, and what you gonna do if we jump you and beat you up? She said,
assistant principal?
yeah, and then they were joking. It was a joke. It was a joke, but it was something that she said that I said, she's not playing. She said, okay. She said, I'm gonna let you. She said, because I'm going to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. And I laughed. I said, and they said, oh, what is that going to do? And I said, you'll never work again.
Right.
You'll never have a job. You'll never get this. I said, you don't understand. I said, I'm with you, principal such and such. I said, because they're thinking in the moment with their feelings. She's thinking long term. And I'm not just going to hit your pockets. I'm going to run your family pockets, and I'm going to let you have these things. But I'm going to play on a different level that you, unfortunately, you won't be able to play on, because it's going to the responsibility really is going to fall on your parents, because you are still a minor. You still are covered underneath the law.
That's what they forget.
And that's what sometimes they forget, and they don't really understand.
They don't understand what that means.
So I said, you know what? And I joked with my little students. I said, y'all can go ahead and beat me up. I'm going to lay down on the ground. I said, but every time you go and buy them Jordans, I want you to remember my name. Every time you go and do something, you going to know who I am. I said, for the next couple of years, I said, I'm going to love you. I may even drop the charges. Some of them I may keep. Because at the end of the day, discipline is love. I believe that love also abides in correction. I also believe that love abides in discipline. And discipline is not to hurt you or to bring you, or really should be used to cause harm. It should just really it should really be used as a guide to help steer you in the path of where you're going, where you want to go, where your heart lies, where your purpose lies. And then also, smack down some of that pride. Develop some humility. And also increase that self-awareness and take the accountability that, I am not perfect, regardless of what my mother say. Oh, you do so great, but the world say you suck. So there's a cognitive dissonance somewhere between what your mom say and what the world is saying and showing. But give me some feedback on that.